Hello, people. This week I read Blade Runner, which I think the actual title is I like better. Do androids dream of electric sheep? I mean, it's a better title, but once Harrison Ford's in a movie, everyone's just going to call it Blade Runner for infinity. So I understand why they did it, right? Publisher wants to get money. I'm not mad at it. That's the main reason I've wanted to, right? Ever since I heard, right, everyone talks about this movie like it's great. And I watched it. I didn't think much of it. But anytime a movie gets made out of a book, I'm interested in the book. What is it that motivated all this extra effort, right? Especially, and it's sci-fi. So I've been looking forward to reading this book. And Spotify did like a month free for me, right? So they did a month free, and in it, they've added this where you can listen to books on Spotify. Only 15 hours. So that's not really great. But, Blade Runner's under 15 hours. So I said, you know what? It's like a free book. Let's give it a go. No better time than now. Side note before we go on, your Spotify for reading isn't that great. I mean, it'll keep track of what you're reading. That's fine. But I don't use Spotify enough. Maybe there's some way to fix this. But I had this, like you'll pause it and it fades. Well, the people keep talking. So I'm like losing a word and a half maybe. And then maybe a half a word or two coming in when it unpauses. I could understand still what was happening. It was just annoying. Also, again, in comparisons to your Audible, I have no way of taking notes. So when I listen to an Audible, I can clip things, right? You just hit the clip button, and then later, that's why I'm able to use the Audibles for these videos. Later, I can just go listen to the clips, right? And I don't have to stop and write out notes. But for this one, I had to stop and write out all my notes. Not the end of the world, just differences, right? So I suppose if you just casually want to hear a book, the Spotify is fine. But if you want more, just go Audible. Not an ad, by the way. Okay, so I understand the premise of what's happening, right? I knew it going in. The sort of the background of it. But let's say you don't. The book is great. The book is great if you know nothing going in. If you know the movie, I think the book does better. I think if you read the book and then watch the movie, I think you might appreciate the movie better. Okay, so the premise of the book is he's a bounty hunter hunting androids, essentially. They call them Andes, but it was written, I think, in the 60s or something. So I'm not going to be too hard on them for the names. They're androids, and he hunts them. So when I watched the movie, I thought it was stupid. Like, who cares why they're androids? What's the big deal? And so I'm reading the book, and it has this whole deeper, like, slice that if they'd have added into the movie would have been fantastic to me. So we have an Earth, and it builds all of these issues I'm going to bring up fantastically, right? There's not a big block of let me just fill you in on everything that's the problem. He lets it slowly seep in. And some of it isn't the best writing, per se, but the concepts are so great that you don't almost care, right? So in other stories, if characters dialogue too much about concepts pertinent to the book, it sort of feels like the author's just telling me through them, and it takes you out of character. In this sense, it kind of doesn't. And even when there are a paragraph here or there of just descriptor, it still doesn't take me out of it, because he's chewing on such big, meaty concepts. I get, he starts by it's him and his wife, and they're sort of at odds, and they're talking about dialing up a mood. He presents it very lived in, but the idea essentially is from when you get from the early bit, you can grab a machine or do something that I want to feel like every decision I make is good, and you punch 597, and now every decision you feel like is the right decision. I want to be very industrious today. Well, that's a 391, and you punch in 391 and you become very industrious that day. And of course, she wants to be depressed. There's a whole argument about it. But the idea to me of what would we do if we could? I don't doubt that if we could, a good chunk of people would. A good chunk would just constantly. But then would it be like a drug? Because people are people. And at some point, I feel like, what do we say? We'd go, I want something real. I want the real emotion. We do that even now, right? So in this era of everything digital, what do we want? We got kids. By kids, I mean, young people, not 85. Increasing the sales on vinyl because we want a more true to form audio, right? So if you'd have asked anyone 25 years ago, they're like, don't invest in a vinyl, that's stupid. It's dying. There's no future in it. It's sort of the same with books, right? Why don't I just watch the movie? Why am I reading the book? I like the source. I like to be closer to that nectar, whatever it is, whatever my thing, people still go to concerts. You can just listen at home. No, it's something else. It's this added element. I got to imagine the same thing would happen even if you could dial up your emotions. At some point, there'd be a cause or a group that was all about feeling the day, right? And my mind is just racing through these as they're having their intermarriage argument over the thing. We get the sense that there's a population problem. They don't even see it as a problem. It's just a reality. He's very happy that he's one of 12 people that live in this building or something. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the crap happened to... That's my first instinct. It's what happened that got rid of all the people. Some are leaving. He calls it migrating out. And the others that are staying are slowly getting irradiated. So I'm like, boom, we had some kind of nuclear war, and I'm living in the aftermath. But he doesn't harp on it, right? He's not very harping on it. But that aftermath is affecting our characters. It gives the book a very noir type of feel, like these old noir detective kind of things, right? So there is action, but it's more of the psychological. That's what I want to say. They call it immigrate or degenerate because the earth is full of dust. That dust is slowly irradiating you. You take tests to see if you're still a viable person, meaning you can still procreate. And we don't get too into why some people have stayed. They say it in the sense of, what do we say? He says it to the effect like it's a vestigial attachment that humanity itself has to the planet Earth rather than leave for Mars. But they give you a lot of benefits. I think they said, they'll give you an android and a spot to live if you leave, if you choose to migrate. So the government's trying to encourage it, but they're not going to force it. And some people are stuck because once you get too irradiated, they're not taking you. So he's in this weird spot. I think he's here sort of to earn money. You get that sort of sense, but we don't harp on the leaving part. This is the coolest part to me. This is the nugget that opens up the entirety of the story for me. He owns an electric sheep. And it's sheep down to its sort of roots, right? It has internal organs that are fake. It has moods that are programmed. It eats, it needs to be cared for. I think you probably even need to shear it every so often. You got to feed it, monitor it, to keep it caged. It even gets sick. An electric sheep And instantly I'm like, one, it's showing me technologically where Earth is. Two, from where I'm sitting as I'm reading it to begin with, I just can't imagine why would you own an electric sheep. And the way he talks about it, it's not just I own it. What is it? There's a keeping up with the Joneses element to it. Because very quickly you start to realize that owning a real sheep is what he wants, that he doesn't have access to or can find one is the problem. And so to not be shunned by his neighbors, to function in society, he owns an electric one. And they got electric sheep, electric bugs, electric cows, and no one, it is like this speakeasy thing, right? So that even the repair people that come look like veterinarians, the whole 9 yards. There's a whole industry to it. And I'm sitting there, or again, early on, like, what in the crap is happening? And it feeds things very well to you. The Terminus War. And these two things explain the electric sheep. The Terminus War, which sounds wicked cool, right? At some point in our history, in Earth's history, now mind you, side note, this has happened in the far distant future of 2020, which is just hilarious to me. Again, if you wrote this in 1960, the year 2020 really sounds far off. But you really should have used like 3042 or something. But that's a side note. It's happening in 2020. There's a Terminus War somewhere in our history. And they say somewhere because even the author says that no one remembers. I mean, it was just utter devastation. No one exactly remembers who started it or why they started it. They're just now living in the aftermath. So you have, of course, some cities didn't make it. Some cities are full, but then this cloud of radiation is just descending on the earth. And everywhere it goes, everything starts to die. Everything. Right? And so out of this, because out of the aftermath, you have people who understand the earth, right? So if like half the people were gone, I'd understand what City Hall is. I'd understand what the police station is. I'd understand what roads and roadsides mean. Half the people left would still be, American or German. And in that sense, we can start to rebuild it with its shell of itself. But a lot of underneath would be gone. Culture, maybe Catholicisms, whatever you want to insert. These things that are too much to hang on to, that needed extra people to do. Small little cliques things, right? Like let's say a bunch of Grateful Dead people lived. Now, instead of it being this small fraction of people who like this music, it'd be a large percentage of the people who lived like the Grateful Dead. And that would start to affect society. So in this somehow grew up, right, what they call Mercerism. And that is like life, the sacredness of life. And not just your own. Any animal, anywhere becomes sacred. And they have big books that tell you the current price of everything, and you can't rip people off. If you find a horse, you could sell it, but the rate is about this, and maybe you can get a little more out of them. Somebody steals it or sells you a fake one that was supposed to be real. Massive punishments. On and on we go. So in that sense, he wants a real sheep. I think he had a real cat. At one point, someone finds a spider, whips out a little tube he has carried with him, everything's to grab, to hold. Because if you're trying to promote all life, right, then you don't need someone finding a long lost bird and just killing it and eating it. Because the earth has none of these birds. So if I find two, I could repopulate the earth with turkey, let's say, but not if that idiot eats it. So in develops Mercerism, and the whole of society is just entrenched in this belief. This is a well-known belief to everybody. If you're, the boss wouldn't question you if you took a day off because your cat died, this kind of thing. And that it feels detached makes it seem more real to me. Like it's my world isn't their world because the Terminus War hadn't killed my world, so to speak. It's a very cool concept. And I really like it. They call him a chicken head. Again, he wrote it, he thinks of his terms, but it's kind of like someone who's mentally impaired in some way. And I'm assuming that they're saying it like the radiation got to him. But it reads weird. It reads like something else is happening. We get this, I swear there's this long chunk where it seems like, again, this is the sense that I get, is like he's an android himself, but on a particular course that's leading him to life, if that makes sense. It's pretty deep, it's pretty vague, but his sections just read so particular that if I take them like they are, it almost unbalances the book, and everything else is so good that I don't take it the way it's presented. It's very weird. I like it a lot. To talk about the tomb world, how he has to, these memories of coming up when for ages he's living like as some lower life form, remembering how he used to be able to think more and is slowly recoalescing himself into new forms, and that the form he's in, this mentally impaired human, isn't as great as it could be, but that it's part of the process. It's very deep. I feel like it's like a subtle android evolution. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what I got out of Isidore. When we cut to android killing, so you have people who highly believe in Mercerism. So the question then will come up, right? Because, and they bring it up in stages, but Mercerism tells them, don't even kill a worm. Again, that organic life is important. It does something to the ground, etc. But a worm, in comparison to an android who has in its mind sort of all our data knowledge, that's intellect. It has an intellect. These androids can talk to you, have conversations. It's intellectual. But then the question is it life, right? So how do you square Mercerism and not killing a worm with killing an android who's clearly more valuable in these intellects and interactions than a worm is, right? So for a base of people who are so dedicated to things living, the thought of killing something is this big, that's why it's a big deal, right? So it's the wife even calls him sort of like a murderer, right? These poor Andes, that's what they call them. These poor androids didn't do anything wrong, that you just let them be, right? And once you get that concept, the whole story sits a lot different in your sort of stomach here. I really liked it. He goes up because there's a new type of the M3 or whatever we're going to call it. It's the newest type. Because that's the next thing you think, right? Just naturally. Why are they making them this way? Meaning, they're making them as real as humanly possible. They want, the companies in their way want it indistinguishable from a human being in every way from top to bottom. Bleeds, drinks water, internal organs, imprinted memories, the whole thing. And you get a sense that outside of Earth, there's this whole market for them. That's what the people want. The people paying. At some point, you realize it's a doll. They want it more real for every use they have of it. And so they made this new type. And it hurt his boss, essentially, like his higher up, so that he gets his remainder of his assignment, which is 6 of these new types. A very deadly thing to have to do. And he's got to go get them. He has what he calls the Voight-Kampff test. It's an emotion test. Turns out there's multiple tests. One checks eye dilation. One checks pulse in the spinal cord, reflex, all this kind of in-depth stuff. His is emotion. His is that they can't emote. They can't feel pity. And these tests become a big part of the story. It's not just he gives the test and starts shooting. So he goes up to the company and starts his test with a Rachel Rosen, supposedly the daughter of the company. And in this test, you start to realize the depth. Bug collect. He asks about bug collecting. He asks about if you've had a leather wallet. Abortion, which is just funny to me. So what is it? It's illegal in this book. Touchy subject then, touchy subject now. Then being the 19 whatevers. He wrote this in the 60s, I think. Touchy. In any case, the fact that even having a bug collection or a leather wallet wouldn't just be illegal. It would be abhorrent to these people. That you would kill a cow and take its skin and then, put your money in it. You're just disgusting. And then when she doesn't have these reactions, he's like, you're an android. And they try and trick her that she's not. They want the test to fail. But it doesn't. He works. They try to give him an owl as a bribe. Turns out the owl's fake too. Very cool. He starts hunting them. I think the first is an opera singer. She plays it like he's like a weirdo. Calls the cops and everything. Runs the whole, like everything's normal, which is what some of them are doing. One's an opera singer. One's like a police chief at a precinct he never knew existed. Right? And they are acting completely like a normal person. They play along. You start to question, like, is Rick wrong? Did he kill these people accidentally? Is he an actual murderer? Turns out he wasn't. He gets them all. He gets the first 3. One pretended to be a Russian cop, one the opera singer, and one police chief. 3 in one day. So it was a risk to his life as well as this clash with his religion. So it was a very heavy day. And he goes from collecting 3,000 in credits, which is a particularly large sum to them. He stops right off and buys a goat. A Nubian goat, I think they call it. And him and his wife have it's because he only had a fake sheep before. So when he presents it to her, he's like, this is a real goat. And she gets like a religious moment with it. Then they go to the empathy box, which is also cool but interesting. You grab this empathy box and all the people who believe in Mercerism will also grab it. And it does like a transfer of some kind where whatever you're feeling gets sent out to the masses to partake in your joy and their pains. You absorb some of their pains. It gets pretty deep into concepts. It's very cool. I do have to mention here that we get into some adult themes, right? Some sexy time. Warning, it doesn't get gratuitous, but the concepts are there, and it's not purposeless. It works itself into the concepts and the story. So I don't hate it, but just know going in, maybe not good for little kids. Yeah, you've been warned. Android ended up killing the goat, just FYI. You feel kind of bad about it. And then at the very end, he finds a frog up in Oregon. He brings it home and he's like, because frogs are supposed to be extinct, amphibians being the weakest, most susceptible to radioactive fallout. But this one's alive. He brings it home, and his wife finds out it's a robot. And so now the idea is, like, what is a robot frog doing just in the middle of desolate Oregon? Right? You add that to they're imprinting memories into these androids. Some don't know they're androids. Some do know and are pretending to be other things. It's like you feel almost like the robot world's taking over the real world, right? Again, more analogies to today. It's subtle, though. It doesn't go any further than that. And his wife then orders, at the very end, he goes to take a nap because he did a record number of killing these things. And she orders some robot flies and maintenance on the robot frog because that's their new fake one, because they can't end up with a real one. It's a very, very good story. It's not long. Go ahead and check it out. I think, is that it? Is that all I got to cover? I think that's it. I really like the way this presents. It really, as you grab each concept, you chew, and then he's adding new. So you're constantly chewing. You're constantly there to think about it. I feel like I might buy this book. At least I'll be on the hunt for if it's on sale. I think I'd buy it on sale. Definitely worth a reread. I also am thinking of rewatching the movie because I think this might help me and my enjoyment of the movie. In any case, I think we good for today until you see these ads. All right. These are my books, available for purchase on Amazon Kindle. Are my books better than this one? I don't. Maybe no. Maybe if you only could buy one book, go ahead and buy that one and then get mine later, right? If I'm being honest. He bites down pretty good on this concept, and I'm very happy about it. Very happy. I love the old, is it a live android kind of concept, but it's not always done well. All right. Okay, people. Talk to you next week.